in on the events that are rapidly unfolding in Austin with the Robert Robison case, the condemned murderer who is scheduled for execution last Thursday and was spared by a last second 11th hour decision by the Texas Supreme Court to allow the House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence to get live testimony from Robertson today at noon. Jody, I don't think it's happened yet, but here's the very latest. We can talk about this. He was scheduled to appear in person to do testimony before the committee that voted 7-0 to stop the execution and bring him on to testify about the shaken baby syndrome.
Yeah.
You're familiar with all that.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And there was a law.
Who among us has never heard that expression? Yeah, sure.
Well, yeah. So the shaken baby syndrome was proven to be erroneous in its scientific basis. And not one there, as I understand it, and viewers correct me if I'm wrong, there has never been a successful prosecution of a shaken baby syndrome death. And so in 2013, the legislature passed a law, the state legislature passed a law that said you can throw out a case based on junk science. And in this case, the argument, Jody, is that the shaken baby syndrome, which was the bedrock of his conviction, his criminal conviction, is essentially junk science. So they were going to bring Robertson on today to testify about how this has impacted his case, his life, and certainly a life and death situation.
Well, more than just junk science, it's thought now, given the evidence that they gathered at the time, that this child may have died as a result of untreated pneumonia. That it got out of control very quickly, and it imitated some of the effects that you might see if a child had some sort of trauma, internally in the many vascular areas inside the brain and bleeding and that sort of thing in the tissue. And it's just a horrible, horrible story to begin with. And it's been compounded apparently. And I think most people, I would be surprised if it's not true. I think most people are still under the impression that shaken baby syndrome, where you can take a child and literally shake it to death or cause its death by shaking, is still a thing. I think a lot of people still think that it exists and are not aware that the science has generally proven that that just isn't the case at all. At least in terms of this particular instance. And, I wasn't terribly familiar with this case. I remembered it, but I remembered it vaguely. And when you see that many people in Austin agree on anything, it's worth listening to. And, for most of my life, most of my younger life anyway, I thought, okay, the death penalty makes sense. And that there are cases where it needs to be applied. And it's unfortunate, and we should never celebrate it. And it's not something to be happy about, or it's a tragedy that such a thing should exist, but it should be rare. And over time, I think a lot of us have come to realize that there are probably a great many more cases than we're comfortable admitting where an innocent person was put to death. And so if we're going to have it at all, I know the idea of somebody sitting on death row 5, 10, 15 years, it hardly seems worth the effort. Of what's the point if somebody's going to live that long after a conviction? It certainly doesn't work as a deterrent. I mean, that's been demonstrated over and over and over again. And so it's mostly vengeance. It's mostly getting rid of people we'd rather not have in our society. And all of that may be understandable, but at the same time, if we are going to have the death penalty, then we really, really need to be way beyond meticulous in how we apply it. And if it takes extra time to exhaust appeals, well, so be it. It's expensive. And it is painstaking and often painful for the victims' families, because every time somebody comes up for execution and they're expecting some measure of justice, it gets delayed again, or it's just a gift that keeps on giving in so many awful ways. And in this particular case, it sure seems like, given all the evidence and all the scientific advances and things we've learned since this guy was convicted, that he does not need to be on death row. And then here at this late hour, Greg Abbott, who has said nary a word leading up to this, suddenly comes out afterwards, after this whole process has been stopped, and just rips the bipartisan lawmakers who've gotten together to try to save this guy's life, or at least stop the execution. And it almost feels like, Brett, it almost feels like Governor Abbott, and I know this is a terrible thing to presume upon the governor. It almost seems like Governor Abbott let everybody else get on the edge of this, and then once it was decided, came around the back and kneecapped everybody so he could make himself look like the sitting emperor of Texas yet again, talking about how his spokesman, in writing a letter about this, said something about usurping, or something of those words, something to that effect, about overriding the constitutional authority of the governor of Texas. No, they were just trying to do the right thing to get the governor on board, who had plenty of opportunity to say something about this whole case before. I guess he didn't want to influence the ruling, or perhaps wanted to use it to his advantage. No, Greg would never do that. Who would suggest such a thing? But yeah, here he comes at the 13th hour, weighing in and saying, well, that's not your job, it's mine. It just feels, well, it feels like the cynicism, the deep, abiding mistrust that we've come to see from Greg Abbott over the years. And that's just one more layer to this mess.
Well, he filed an amicus brief supporting the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, uh, basically telling lawmakers that they stepped out of line.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because this is coming
Oh, you
from the
locked?
man. This is
There
coming
you are.
from. I'm sorry.
You locked up for a second. Go ahead.
Okay, it's coming from the governor who the as soon as he possibly could reversed the conviction and asked for a pardon of Daniel Perry, who was convicted last year of killing Garrett Foster in cold blood, shot him 5 times in cold blood, unprovoked.
Went out of his way.
Unprovoked.
Went out of his way.
Yeah, so he could not wait to pardon Daniel Perry. But now that another man, who by the way is autistic and by all accounts a very soft-spoken gentleman who really never had any problem, never had a hateful bone in his body, is somewhat emotionally. I guess whatever the autism creates in him is emotionally impaired, and really doesn't understand what happened to him. He just has always said that he's innocent. What's impressed me is that over the past several months, when this thing has been litigated, and the appeals and the last second attempts to try to keep him from being executed, so many people, including the detective, the chief detective in the case back in 2003, has come forward and said, now that we've had a chance to learn more about the absence of the science behind shaken baby syndrome, this man is innocent. This man did not do this. This is a detective saying this. And now.
And not just subtly, he's absolutely saying we were flat wrong about this.
Yeah.
And the governor of the state of Texas wants to argue with the lead detective, who was absolutely sure at one time that they had the right guy, but in hindsight and in the light of progress, realizes now they didn't. Here's the thing, and there's really no getting around this. When you have a state penal system in which fully half of the facilities are not air conditioned, then you probably have a large number of people in the state who really could care less about whether this guy lives or dies. As far as they're concerned, throw them all under the jail. That's what they deserve. They wouldn't be there if they didn't do something to deserve it along the way. Never mind that the system that put them there, while
I've lost your audio feed, Jody. I've lost your audio feed. Check your microphone. Oh, we lost you. We lost Jody. Let's see if we get him back. Sorry, everyone. We are new to this YouTube live broadcast. Let's see if he jumps back in here. I apologize to those of you who are there. Anyway, it was decided earlier today that Robertson would not testify in person. It was decided that he was too much of a risk to testify in person at the state capitol. So it is my understanding that that testimony is going to take place at some point today via virtual setup, whether it's Zoom or Skype or however they get that set up. We'll be talking more about how this is playing out. But again, the big news. Hold on, Jody may be back.
I don't think so. I'm
There we
trying to
go.
get in there.
You there? You there,
Can you hear
Jody?
me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I can't see myself. Can you see me?
I cannot see you, sir.
Okay,
I
well,
cannot see you.
let me finish my thought because I don't want to drag this down any further from where we were headed. The state of Texas has facilities, prison facilities that don't have air conditioning, and they may sound like, well, tough. I think a lot of people respond that way. But the truth of the matter is that in Texas, that could be a death sentence easily for people who've been convicted and sent to prison. And yet, most folks really don't care, getting folks to where they realize, okay, that might be the most inhumane thing you could possibly do to another human being. Getting them to the point where they recognize that is a long walk in some areas of this state and with some people. And so getting them to care about a guy who may have been wrongfully convicted of killing a child, it may not be top of mind. It may not be that big a deal. Well, I've seen him on TV. He's kind of weird. He presents differently. So, well, he probably did something. That's the way a lot of people think. And as a result, we have some unconscionable situations that arise. And for the governor of the state of Texas to wade into this now when he had ample opportunity before to take the side of the people who just as soon see people like this thrown under the jail for a few political points, which is exactly what this feels like in his timing, is just more indication of the kind of cynic that holds that office.
Yeah, it's no mistake that early voting starts today, and he waits till today to come out and make this strong, very ultra pro conservative decision. I just go back to
Very tough on crime
Yeah, tough on
words.
crime,
Yeah,
but I just go back to his pardon, his unconscionable pardon of Daniel Perry. The just hours after he was convicted, he told the Pardons and Parole Board, "I expect you to pardon this man or recommend a pardon, and I'm going to grant it." He knew nothing about the case. He didn't even know enough to see that Daniel Perry was a longtime racist and a longtime bigot and a longtime hate mongerer who absolutely fired 5 shots at a man who was not threatening him. He was holding a weapon at the time, as is allowed in the state of Texas, but he did not draw that weapon on Daniel Perry, and he killed him in cold blood. And Abbott couldn't wait to pardon the man.
could
So
not
so
wait to
now he
pardon him.
can't wait to see an autistic man die, especially 3 weeks before a very critical election.
Yeah, and that's I knew Daniel Perry's widow, or I know her, Whitney Blanton. And
Whitney, yeah.
if you knew Whitney and you know what she's dealt with all of her life to begin with, and you get to a point where you think to yourself, what else could happen? How much more strength is required on the part of this couple, and then this happens. And you had to know her, you had to know them, and what kind of really decent human beings they were. Yeah, he was out there exercising his legal right under Texas law, whether I agree with it or not, and didn't do a thing and wound up shot by this guy who was actually probably on a hunting trip as much as anything. And Abbott just cannot wait to let him walk again. And so the point is, he's always currying favor with that core, with that grab the gun and get the ammunition, let's, bar the door and keep the engines from coming in attitude that seems to just revel in this sort of stuff. When in this particular case, you've got a man who probably didn't deserve to be where he was, does not need to be executed, doesn't deserve to be executed, and has people from all over the political spectrum standing up to say this is wrong, except for the guy who claims that's my right. You don't have a say. It's up to me, Greg Abbott.
Well, he's never missed an opportunity to grandstand and score political points, and it feels exactly what he's trying to do now. Although I'm not sure he has any power to intervene. He's asking the state Supreme Court to intervene, which, by the way, it already has done. It has already sanctioned and signed off on this testimony being provided, probably or possibly, Jody, as we speak. As I said when you were off the air, it was decided earlier today not to let Robertson testify in person because the state security or DPS or whoever's in charge of security of the Capitol said it was too much of a risk. Really, this come
I
on.
just call me naive, call me foolish, call me adolescent in my thinking here, but I just don't ever remember when Texans were all that eager to hire to go hang the wrong guy. And I think most people, if they heard of the facts of this case, the details of this case, will realize this is not the right guy. This guy doesn't deserve to hang, and would probably come around to the mindset of the people who've gone to bat to try to get him get him off of death row and get his execution stopped. But here comes Abbott, and he just can't wait to throw that rope over the branch. And he does it for one simple reason: the people who write the big checks to him are of the same mind, and they think that, well, let's just hang him and worry, let God sort him out. I guess that just doesn't seem very Texan to me, and it sure doesn't seem very faith-based, as a lot of these people seem to claim. So I was somewhat gratified. I mean, insofar as I knew the details of the case when these decisions came down that stopped the execution. We don't want to and should not want to execute the wrong person. That's just fundamental decency. And yet, in the face of all of that, here comes Greg Abbott, who knows better, and says, well, that's my decision, not yours. And dude, it's just, oh my gosh, how soon is that next election? It's just
Well,
can't get here soon enough.
He has no problem playing God and inserting himself into a situation on basically political grounds. So,
Very
well,
true.
we'll follow this today and see what happens. I'm sure more developments are to come, and then we can talk again tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to get together again tomorrow for, I guess, episode 3 of our little audio podcast. And so we'll probably have that up and online either tomorrow night or Wednesday at some point.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Or we can do YouTube Live again, Jody.
We could. I don't know. Well, as long as we got that one scheduled tomorrow morning, let's go ahead and do that, and we can do this too.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Hold on a second. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you: is there a chance that we might push that back a little bit tomorrow? How fungible are you in your schedule?
I hate that word. It just sounds weird. Fungible sounds like something you apply ointment for. Ooh, is that fungible? Oh, does this look infected? No, it's just fungible. So
It's a good
yeah,
word.
sure, we can move that back a little bit
Okay.
tomorrow. It doesn't really matter since we record it. We can do it anytime. But
Okay.
yeah, it'll probably be online. If I will shut up and get to the point, it could be online tomorrow afternoon.
There we go. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining with us, and we'll check back with you soon. Jody, thanks.
Thank you, Brett. Talk to you later.
Okay. All right.
Bye.